Well, happy Green Spirit. It is great to be here at our very first virtual Green Spirit gathering. My name's Selena Fox, and I have been part of Green Spirit celebrations for many years, since helping to birth this organization back in 1974. Green Spirit is the name that we presently use for our festival, which is also known as Lughnasadh, Lammas, and by some other names depending on the tradition. Today, I'm going to share with you some chants, some meditations, some symbols, and some other things that you may want to weave into your Lughnasadh and Lammas celebrations. I'll begin with a chant that I helped create back in the 1970s. At the time, before Circle Sanctuary Nature Preserve became a thing, it manifested in '83, but this goes back to the 1970s. A man by the name of Jim Allen was my partner at the time and helped me with the birthing of Circle Sanctuary in '74. And the two of us did pagan folk music and traveled around various places in the USA. And we created some music together. And this is a chant that we created. It's actually a round, and it's known as Lammas Round. Now is the time when the harvest starts again. So sing and dance until night's end, praising the powers on whom we depend. Now is the time when the harvest starts again. So sing and dance until night's end, praising the powers on whom we depend. Indeed, as many of our speakers have mentioned, this, for many people, is the first of several harvest festivals. And certainly among contemporary pagans, that is the case. And we at Circle Sanctuary at Green Spirit time often are doing a harvest. We have an herb called Mugwort, Artemisia vulgaris, that is in a beautiful hedge around our maypole. And we do a grand harvest every year. And then during the weeks that follow, as the mugwort becomes dry, we store it away, and then we use it in various forms for celebrating our festival. And I'm so glad that we're finding a way to be able to connect today and have our festival online. So harvest in old Europe, summer solstice was the start of the haying time. And then when Lughnasadh came, that harvest was done, and then grain started being harvested. And different types of grain, and the word corn is used today by contemporary pagans in America, not only in its North American and South American and Central American sense, maize, but also in the old European sense of the word, which meant wheat, grain. So this is a time for gathering in grain, in particular wheat, but barley and oats and other grains are also part of that experience. And it really depended on where you lived, what farming community you were part of, as to what agricultural cycle you were connected with. But the universality of grains across Europe for hundreds and hundreds of years We have the old pagan Lughnasadh that then evolved into the Anglo-Saxon Lughnasadh or Lammas. And from pagan to Christian times, these holidays kept being celebrated. Indeed, in the 1960s and 1970s, as contemporary paganism started emerging into public view, in some of the earlier Wheel of the Year calendars, contemporary pagans actually used the Lammas name, I think in part because it was easier to say, and it also had passed into folk custom. Lammas, Lammas time, Lammas tide is the name for the entire festival time. And while August 1st is one of the traditional days in which Lughnasadh and Lammas were celebrated in the past, also in the past, it was a multi-day and multi-evening celebration. People continued their festivities for days and nights. There are some of the folk ways surviving in different parts of the world, including in the USA. Indeed, I have gone to a Lammas Tide celebration in Eastern Shore, Maryland, which has its traditions have a Christian Lammas underpinning, but actually have expanded to be multicultural and multi-faith. There is a blessing of the combines the first weekend of August, and I've had the opportunity to go there and witness this full firsthand. One of the real amazing things is the fact that all sorts of harvest equipment brought into the streets of this small town in the Eastern Shore, Maryland. And indeed, people have a chance to look at the equipment, a lot of it being very huge. So for the blessing of the combines, one of the local ministers does prayers, and literally the combines are blessed before the harvest season goes into its next phase. There are other things that are connected with Lughnasadh and Lammas and in the agricultural sense. So in addition to being a time for harvesting grain and celebrating that, and harvesting all sorts of produce and herbs, this was a time for going into the fields and forest and other natural places and harvesting berries. In fact, bilberry is sometimes linked to this holiday. Now here in southwestern Wisconsin, we're in a bioregion known as the driftless area. We have a variety of different berries that happen during the course of the summer. And this morning, for my Lughnasadh Lammas altar that I created, and which will appear in social media at some point later today, I've been taking part in this wonderful online festival that's been really great. You will have a chance to see some of these first fruits. And these are blackberries, and they are just now coming on. And one of the traditions is to pick the first fruits and do an offering of the first fruits to the divine by whatever name or names or forms that are connected with the spiritual, cultural, religious, philosophical traditions of those doing the harvesting. So indeed, some of these wonderful blackberries, these are the first harvest of the blackberries, will be going back to the land with our thanksgiving. And indeed, in the chant, Lammas round, we praise the powers upon whom we depend. I also want to celebrate this holiday that half the world knows is Imbolc. And I have a Bridget's cross woven from reeds that I hold up as a shout out to everyone who may have joined us, who's actually celebrating the other half of the Wheel of the Year, Bridget's Day, Candlemas, Imbolc. So I wish you bright blessings as well. Indeed, this is the harvest time. And in some traditions, the idea is to go out with a ceremonial scythe or sickle and to take the first of the harvest in a sacred way that often is placed on the altar and presented to the divine in ceremony. Sometimes some kind of creature or being, image, sometimes it's the grain goddess in the form of a crone, is formed from the harvested grain and is kept until the time of planting the next year. There are many different traditions about harvest. Some are connected with this first of the grain harvest. Some are connected also with the next harvest festival, fall equinox, or some people call it Maven, or autumnal equinox. And the last of the harvest festivals is Samhain, also a Celtic fire festival. Some will weave wheat together for charms. And this is an example of one made of some grains at a green spirit festival at Circle Sanctuary Land a number of years ago. Some are more ornate, and indeed, I have seen the folk art of wheat weaving continuing to be passed on through the generations, seen it at art fairs. It's been really a fabulous thing. What are some of the other symbols that we have connected with this time of year? Clearly, it's a time to connect with the sun and the land. And the festival itself is named after Lugh, or Lu, as some people call this god from the Celtic pantheon. The name Lughnasadh actually has the god's name connected with Nasadh, which means assembly. People would gather at this time, grand gatherings. Indeed, in addition to ceremonies, there was feasting and much revelry. Indeed, all sorts of games happened. In Scotland, a game that sometimes got a bit much and caused some injury, so I'm not suggesting we continue that part of that tradition. People would take the grain that has been brought in and put them in huge towers, and at the top make a little hole where people would put a flag on top. And then people would have rivalries and go into the fields and try to take the flags off the tops of the towers. And obviously things could get a bit too exuberant, but ultimately was my own thinking. I have some Scottish as well as some Welsh and English and Irish and French and Swedish and lots of different strands of ancestry from old Europe that are part of the mix. And through my Scottish ancestry, I have come to know the experience of Highland Games. And throughout the USA and other parts of the world, Highland Games has been a way of keeping alive the culture of keeping ourselves fit and having some fun with some athletic events. But the idea of athletic games at the height of summer is actually something quite old, going back in some early Irish writings. This sacred athletic competitions were part of the celebration of Lughnasadh, according to a number of sources. At Circle Sanctuary Nature Preserve, part of our community celebrations have included having our own version of games. Now, there's lore connected with the games, and the foster mother, and some traditions say it's the mother of Lugh, cleared land to have agriculture in Ireland. Well, that was a pretty exhausting task, and she died. And Lugh held games to honor his mother, her foster mother. And those games came to be known as Lughnasadh, the funeral games for his mother. I suspect that underlying that lore is some other lore that the foster mother, the mother figure, actually was a goddess of the land before the Celtic level of culture came to Ireland and some other parts of that part of the world. And in some traditions, the old gods and goddesses show up in lore of the latest wave of spirituality and religion that comes to an area. And you'll find that not only with different pagan traditions, but you'll find some of the old traditions connected with Lughnasadh carried over into Christian European times. And indeed, Anglo-Saxon traditions began in a pagan way, and then as Christianity came in and those in England who embraced the Saxon way became Christian. I do think the idea of doing the grain harvest and taking some of that first harvest and making a new loaf of bread, taking that bread into the local church as part of Lammas, that's what the loaf mass part of the name. I really do think that's rooted in old pagan times. Indeed, I suspect that those loaves were originally offered to spirits of the land, to goddess and god, and goddesses and gods, depending on the pantheon. But today, we can draw on some of those old traditions and some of these old symbols and customs and weave them into celebrations. In the next part of our time together, I'd like to share with you 5 different dimensions of celebrating Lughnasadh and Lammas. And we're going to begin with individual, the personal, and then take that out into the larger world across time and space. So for individual celebrations, and this, you can be a solitary practitioner and work with these, or this can be for those of you who not only have your own individual personal practice, but have a household practice and are part of a spiritual community. You can incorporate this into your Lughnasadh celebrations, because to me, it's important to be able to celebrate on multiple levels. And so we begin with the individual level. You as a soul being, you as a practitioner of nature spirituality. I invite you to share in the chat, if you wish, some ways that you personally celebrate Lughnasadh or Lammas, just yourself. One of the things that I do is to take a nature walk at this time, to be out in nature, experiencing the beauty of the summer. And from year to year, I've come to notice that different experiences happen. Sometimes the autumn, that's the next turning of the wheel, starts making itself known a bit earlier than other years. Some years at this time, it is extremely hot and sunny. We are right in the height of summertime. And in some cases, we actually have temperatures and the whole experience of getting a hint of fall. So take a nature walk, whether you're in an urban, suburban, small town, or rural area, and observe. What are the sounds? What are the images? What kinds of creatures, if any, do you notice? What kinds of crops, plants are you noticing? And where are they in their growing cycle? In addition to taking a walk in nature and noting the season, another of my favorite celebration approaches involves connecting with the Lammas, the Lughnasadh sun, to watch the sun as it rises, to celebrate the sun, to give thanks to the sun. Indeed, in some traditions, Lu is the light bringer, is light, is creativity, is linked not only to this holiday, but is linked with the sun, as is the holiday itself. And then at sunset time, also having a chance to celebrate and to observe your connection with the Lammas night. I think as an individual, a good tradition to adopt is what I call the time release Lughnasadh Lammas, which is to be able to prepare for the celebration over the course of several days and nights, and let the celebration last for several days and nights. And then after you conclude the celebration, taking several days and nights to reflect on your experiences, to journal about it, to meditate on it, to do some dream work with it. This year, 2020, our Celtic Fire Festival of Lughnasadh coincides with full moon time. So on tonight, or in night, the moon's going to get fuller and fuller. Monday night is when we're having our Lammas tide full moon circle, and we will be enjoying connecting with each other also through the wonders of cyberspace. We have some more information up at the Circle Sanctuary website if you'd like to see that. So I invite you to go out and take a Lammas time full moon walk sometime this weekend, or to find a place where you can commune and attune to that. What are some other personal ways, individual ways to celebrate this holiday time? Make an offering to the land. Whether you're an apartment dweller, dwelling in a home, an RV, some other place, find where you are, connect with the land where you are. If it's your regular home, then honor the spirits of the land of your home. Or if you are visiting somewhere, being able to connect with the spirits of the land wherever you might be. What are some suitable offerings. Pouring some mead, herbal tea, water onto the ground, often at the base of a large tree, is a technique that I've used, and expressing your appreciation to the land and to the planet Earth. That is our, and if there are particular forms of the divine that you work with in your own individual practice, to honor them as well. You might want to honor the vegetation, divine forms as green spirits, green man, green woman, green God, green goddess. Green spirit is kind of a universal term that I tend to use. You may want to call on the mother goddess and father god and their divine unity, if that's part of your tradition. Doing some physical form of offering, as well as singing or speaking as you do this, is something that's quite ancient, but can be very customizable for yourself. In addition to doing this type of celebration on your own, you may want to kindle a fire. Now, during these pandemic times, typically that is needing to do your celebrations in your home. And I think it can be a wonderful thing to have an honoring of your own home space as part of this, and to kindle a candle, or if you have a hearth fire, to do that. So as I'm mentioning home now, we go to the second dimension of celebrating Lammas and Lughnasadh, and that is the dimension of the household celebration. This is a great time to cleanse your home and to bless it. If you already have done home blessing, you may want to do some additional home blessing. You might actually take some bit of grain, make a little corn dolly, hang that above your front door. You might want to have, if there's several of you together, you may all want to do a blessing through the whole home with each of the elements of nature: earth, air, fire, water, spirit. And you may want to have a big celebration after you've done the home blessing. Another thing that you can do as part of the celebration in the household is to do some work with your threshold, to cleanse your threshold, to put a symbol of the season on your front door. I often will put a wreath of ivy leaves, and in the center, a wheat weaving representing the wheel of the year turning to this sacred time. The household, if you are there with other humans, you may want to have your own household ritual and feast, your own party. You may want to make some Lammas food. And indeed, Georgette at our Green Spirit Festival this year did some excellent examples of things that you can create as part of celebrating the holiday, having a feast. And as part of that feast, you and others in your family, your household, honor those sacred forces that have made life possible. You may want to have an altar in your house if you don't already have one, and have it be your household altar. put some symbols of Lughnasadh on that altar. I have small bits of grain that I will put in what I call a Sabbath bowl. And that has been a tradition that I keep throughout the year. With each Sabbath, I put a different kind of substance in the bowl. And for Lughnasadh, it's bits of wheat. For your household, you may also want to do some type of meditation together to connect with the land, to connect with the sacred season, to connect with each other, to connect with the sacred in a universal way and in specific ways according to traditions of those who are in the household. And when we look at the household dimension, if your household has a hearth fire, well, what a thing that you could do. Yes, it's the middle of summer, and chances are you'll have air conditioning on and not really up for a fire, but you can use that hearth, that fireplace, that hearth, and burn a candle there to represent the fire being kindled, the hearth for the home. What we like to do at our home is to be able to have a fire outside. Of course, we live in the country and there's lots of kindling and things available for gathering to make that happen. If you are in a place where you can't have a big bonfire, well, one way of being able to have that sacred fire tradition of this holiday is to get a cauldron or a bowl and put a pillar candle in it and to kindle the fire in that way. And if you're in a place where you really can't have open flames, yes, indeed, they're now battery-operated candles, which is another way of sacred fire with electricity. You might want to get together as the sun rises at Lammas time or as it sets. And as you face the sun, do a chant such as this one. Sacred sun of Lammas, come. Sacred sun of Lammas, come. Sacred sun of harvest, come. And then connecting with the sun, connecting with the blessings that are in your life, the lives of those with you in your household. Another thing I would encourage you and others in your household to consider is another tradition connected with this time of year. Engage in intentional acts of generosity. Indeed, during this pandemic time, many people are struggling economically. And if you do happen to have some financial resources, some food resources, some other resources that you're willing to share with others, there are opportunities to do so. There are food pantries in many different locations, and if you have some food to contribute, it would be good to call up or do some messaging of that source first to find out a safe way to be able to make those contributions. Some places that are helping to combat hunger make it very easy to contribute online to funds to help those who are in need. Indeed, many people in the US and other parts of the world have what's known as food insecurity. And at this time of harvest, as we celebrate harvest, I think we also need to be aware that an old tradition has been to share that harvest, to share that bounty with others. Related with what I call household prosperity magic is to be able to be appreciative of what you have in your home. A ritual for doing that would be to have everyone who's part of the household to sit together and to pass a symbol around. It might be a lit candle, it might be a chalice, some other symbol that would serve as the device to indicate who has the floor and is speaking. And have each person reflect on something that one is thankful for about the home and about each other. And then as the symbol makes its round around the circle, to be able to speak that. And then do some type of chant or group connection at the end. Many of us during the pandemic time are in what are known as pandemic bubbles. That pretty much means you're locked down in your house, or primarily you're staying at home, working from home if that's your particular reality. And then others who are part of the household also are engaged in that way. So being able to celebrate your connections, to deepen your connections, and yes, have some comic relief from the stress of constantly being together can also be a good thing to do as a household, to actually have a time where you can make merry together. Having a feast, having a fire, having a ceremony, and doing something bardic, sharing stories, having a household time of sharing stories, or you might want to share songs such as in a bardic circle. Well, these are some of the household dimensions of celebrating Lughnasadh and Lammas. And now I'd like to share with you the spiritual community ways of celebrating this holiday. Well, clearly you're with us either watching live or you're watching later, because one of the great things about doing this online and being able to later have videos available, you can come back and watch again, or if you aren't able to take part in the entire festival, or this is not a good day for you, you can actually continue your celebration once we get these things posted up. So community celebration has been a part of my tradition, as well as my personal way of celebrating Lughnasadh and my household way. And the community way, I'll share some experiences from the Circle Sanctuary community over time. Yes, we've done our own version of Highland Games and the funeral games of Loose Mother, and we have had a lot of fun with that over the years. We've evolved that over time. Having a huge bonfire has long been a tradition, and we often are kindling that on the main night of the festival. Our community festival, when it's in person, typically goes 3 days and 2 nights, beginning on a Friday and culminating on a Sunday afternoon. And Saturday night, kind of the culmination of the day's events, we typically go out and have our main ritual and kindle a huge bonfire. Now, in some past times, we've also kindled fires on some of the high places on our land. And indeed, one of the older traditions involving sacred fire in communities for Lughnasadh has been to go to a high place, the top of the mountain, to go to the top of a hill, and there to be able to kindle a fire as part of a celebration. Indeed, I'm hoping that we'll be able to hold images in our mind of Lughnasadh fires happening around the planet at this time. Even if they aren't physically there, we can call up the memories of this ancient tradition. A spiritual community also can be a time for sharing information, perspectives, doing education. And I have done different types of Lammas and Lughnasadh workshops over the years, not only to carry on some old lore and old ways of practicing, but to introduce some new ways and some new possibilities for keeping the holiday alive. And then keeping new traditions emerging. Indeed, how we're celebrating now is part of the much larger celebrations that have been happening for hundreds and hundreds of years. And what's great about spiritual community in cyberspace is we have an opportunity for all of us to gather and connect with us, even though geographically we're quite distant. Another part of spiritual community celebrations that we've had is the Lammas Fair. And this actually goes back to the Middle Ages and most likely prior to that. At this time of year, there were country fairs. People not only got together and marketed their wares, but livestock got bought and sold, and there also were all sorts of social celebrations as part of the fair. And matchmaking tended to happen as people would gather and getting a chance to meet some others and possibly connect with someone you may want to spend your life with. Well, we have done what we call the Lammas Fair in the past as part of our Green Spirit celebrations. We have had a variety of vendors and some craftspeople, some people that have shops, brick and mortar or online stores. And in fact, right behind me, there is a tapestry from one of our community members who died last year. I want to honor Beckett, also known as Robin on Hold, for her contributions to Circle Sanctuary over the years, and give thanks to her for donating this tapestry and a number of her other things to our center. And it keeps her memory alive, and it keeps on the tradition of interconnectedness across generations. Community, I not only define as those of us who are here incarnate now, but community that is across time and space. We call together at our spiritual community celebrations not only spirits of the land, but ancestors and the divine, calling on the Great Mother, the Great Father, nature spirits, the elementals. It depends on who's facilitating the ceremony as to what the sacred names and forms are. We like to have different ritualists, and they're usually Circle Sanctuary ministers, do our main ritual, our ritual of opening and our ritual of closing. It gives us a chance to keep alive the tradition of having ritual together, but also having some variations. Some other community celebration approaches have involved fire spinning and fire processions. One year we had mullein stalks and kindled them and lit the sacred fire with. Mullein stalks, also known as witch candles, hag's tapers, Jupiter's rod, all sorts of different names. And so being able to connect with fire in a variety of ways can be spectacular. And we have fire spinners, fire dancers in our community. After our main ritual on Saturday night, there often are a variety of people spinning fire in different shapes and spinning it in hoops and on bars and wands. It's really quite dramatic. And in fact, we're hoping as we grow the YouTube channel for Circle Sanctuary to be able to share some of that, not only from this particular fire festival, but some of the other festivals that we do. And other things that we have done as a community at the Green Spirit Festival, to work for prosperity for individual community members, for the community as a whole, for the land, and for the planet. We had the opportunity back in 2007 to have one of our rituals be filmed as part of doing some education about Wicca and paganism. And this was done by the BBC. And that was the year 2007 when Circle Sanctuary was involved in some legal actions and finally got the pinnacle, the five-pointed star in circle, point up, on the list of emblems that can be included on grave markers issued by the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. And we did quite a bit of publicity around that and celebrated the success and dedicated grave markers. And that continued to get the word out about not only this religious freedom victory for Wiccans and other pagans, but the fact that nature religion was alive and well, that people were keeping alive these old holidays. And the BBC got wind of that and asked to come. So our closing ritual that year was what I call the Green World Ritual. We held it in our stone circle, and an old friend of mine and a pagan author who was our guest speaker for that event, Eden McCoy, was there to help us with the ceremony. And we called to the sacred directions. We called for blessings of the elements, for clean earth, clean air, clean energy, that's fire, clean water, to celebrate the spirit that connects us all together. And we worked together in ceremony for a more sustainable, healthier planet, for the green world. Well, in sharing that tradition and that experience, that takes us into the fourth dimension of celebrating Lammas and Lughnasadh. And in a little bit, I will be attending to the Q&A. Thank you all for putting questions in and sharing information and putting in some things you'd like some more information about. So in a little bit, we'll be getting to some Q&A. So now we're into what I call the world community. What do we do in the world community? Well, I think one of the best things we can do, especially if you are active in social media, is to put out some greetings for the holiday. If you've created an altar, if you have created a chant, a ritual, written a poem, you found something and adapted it for your work, well, share it. Share it to the greater universe. Indeed. Put out on social media, happy Lammas, happy Lughnasadh. I often will make sure for each of these holidays, in addition to calling out the name or names of the one that I'm celebrating here in the Northern Hemisphere, at least one of my posts every year also honors the 6-month difference in the Southern Hemisphere, for indeed we are a global community. So be able to do some Lammas and Lughnasadh greetings. Do some Facebook live streams if you do that, or some Instagram live streams, or live streams on YouTube. Share some information, share links with articles that are well researched, that you find useful and helpful. The more we share about the holiday, the more we allow information about that and inspiration coming from that to be part of celebrations around the world. And indeed, the nature spirituality realm now is international, with practitioners in more than 200 countries and other places right here on the planet. And one of the great things about social media, and I found this myself in doing our live streams, letting people know about this event, people are able to connect from literally around the planet. And I'm thankful for the chat that allows translation to happen when English isn't the language and I'm live streaming stuff. I'm able to read comments in other languages, and hopefully on the other end, people are able to translate the English I have back into their own language as well. So as we are in the larger world, especially the cyber world right now, we have a real opportunity to take this celebration that began as a Celtic fire festival ages ago and let it evolve as a global holiday, as a time which can converge people of many paths and places. Who are people that celebrate this holiday? Well, certainly those who are Wiccans from different Wiccan traditions. This is one of the 8 Sabbaths, and people that are practicing different pagan paths, Universalist paganism, for example, which blends from many different traditions, as well as specific tribes of paganism. The holiday itself may have many different names, but in addition to pagans celebrating this holiday, there are also people who are Christian that are celebrating it, because this has long been a Christian holiday too, typically going by the name of Lammas, and in more recent decades, it tends to be the Sunday closest to August 1st. In addition to those who are celebrating it in a Christian sense, there are some people who would say that they're spiritual and not religious, and that basically are eclectic in their way of celebrating. So some people who aren't connected with any particular spiritual community or spiritual or religious tradition will weave elements of old customs and contemporary customs into personal practice. And many people have come to celebrate this holiday time as a culture holiday, a folk holiday. Indeed, there was a Broadway play, Dancing at Lughnasadh, that has made the rounds in recent years. And so the holiday name, the old Celtic name, is continuing to get known and celebrated. You don't have to be Celtic heritage to celebrate this holiday. And in fact, I have a number of different Celtic strands in my own ancestral heritage, but I'm a real patchwork quilt of ancestral heritages. And what I endeavor to do is be able to go deep into particular traditions. I've been learning Welsh because I'm part Welsh, and also looking into Scots Gaelic and connecting with some old traditions as part of my learnings for not only Lughnasadh, but the whole Celtic holiday sequence. So as we look at going into the world, I would invite you sometime this weekend, if it feels right for you to do so, to let yourself put some form of Lughnasadh or Lammas or height of summer or green spirit celebration out into the larger world, to be part of the celebration that's happening across cultures, across languages, across the generations, across faith traditions, across national boundaries. It's one of the real magical things about being able to work with ourselves as a world community through cyberspace and inner space. In fact, I invite you now in the next few moments to join me in a short meditation to connect with the celebration around the world. And I'm going to play a singing bowl I got many years ago. It came originally from Japan. And in my interreligious travels, I've taken it around with me. And I invite you, wherever you may be, to sing this note or to tune into it as you connect with the divine according to your own tradition. And then imagine yourself surrounded with a radiant light, a circle of light around you. As you summon the power of Lughnasadh, its sacred time, into yourself and into your circle. Spirit of Lughnasadh within me. Spirit of Lughnasadh within me. Spirit of Lughnasadh within me. And as you reflect, imagine that rays of light are starting to emanate from your own sacred circle. And you shift your perspective. Imagine that you are flying high above where you are seated in your circle of light. And you are able to see circles of light of others taking part in this celebration that are joining in the Green Spirit 2020 virtual celebration right now. Imagine these rays of light connecting circles around the planet, and let your envisioning expand further to also include circles of light for everyone celebrating this sacred time. And so in the Northern Hemisphere, you see groups and individuals celebrating in their homes, out in parks, other places. And in the Southern Hemisphere, also let those rays of light bring forward images of circles of light of people celebrating Bridget's time in the Southern Hemisphere. And then as you see these circles of light interconnecting. Imagine a great radiance forming around the planet as a whole. Lughnasadh, healing around us. Lughnasadh, healing around us. Lughnasadh, healing around us. And imagine the light pulsating, and in a way that works for you, join me and others in pulsating a healing light that dispels COVID-19 virus, sends it off to some other dimension where it's not harming humans and others here on this planet. Let it dissipate, disappear. Put out the intention with your attention that we humans are working together for many traditions, collaborating, connecting for a healthier planet, not only to help humankind, which is endeavoring to move through this pandemic time, but let that pulsating light that you've been envisioning around planet Earth bring for another layer of healing, a deeper level of healing, that of harmony and well-being among humans and with humans and the rest of the natural world. Healing and wellness to planet Earth. Healing and wellness to planet Earth. Healing and wellness to planet Earth. So mote it be. And now, as we shift from a meditative working for a healthier planet here at this sacred time, let us go to the fifth dimension of celebrating Lughnasadh and Lammas. I actually gave a foreshadowing of this. And this is what I call the across the generations celebration. Indeed, how we are celebrating this holiday now and in the next few years to come, we are contributing to this sacred holiday celebration across time, across places. We are laying the groundwork for this holiday to continue to be celebrated in times to come. In fact, I'd invite you for a few moments to use your imagination and project humankind 100 years from now. It is my hope that our planet will be sustained and thriving and in a good space, and we will have worked through the climate change chaos and come up with good ways for all of us humans to be together and to be in better harmony with the rest of the natural world. So let us go 100 years into the future and let us imagine ourselves having a celebration here on planet Earth. But there are places where humans are now living off planet. Wow. Imagine people yet to come, yet to be born, celebrating these holidays in different environments in our solar system. What would that be like? Whether it's the International Space Station or if indeed we do have an encampment on the moon or on Mars, and yes, I think it is great that we had a Mars launch at this Lughnasadh time. Imagine people of the future gathering and celebrating this holiday. And imagine they're telling stories, legends of how the holiday went through some transformations in 2020 due to the pandemic. That, yes, indeed, people found ways of being able to connect in spiritual community with each other in cyberspace and through imagination. Imagine celebrants 100 years from now creating new chants, working with old chants in new ways. And as you are calling up that in your imagination, if you have any particular things that pop up that you'd like to share, I invite you to put them in the Q&A. Well, what I'd like to do now is start taking a look at some of the comments that have come in. And the words for Lammas round. Now is the time when the harvest starts again. So sing and dance until night ends, praising the powers on whom we depend. And I'm putting it in the chat right now. And as I'm doing that, if you have other questions or comments, I invite you to do that. And then Deb is asking, how would you best combine Lughnasadh with a full moon ritual? Or would it be best to do two different rituals a few days apart, tonight and Monday for the full moon? Well, thank you for asking that question. I'm of the belief that it is good to do multiple ceremonies. And today we have our culmination of our Green Spirit Festival. We will have a Lughnasadh ceremony in this very festival, and I give thanks to Reverend Georgette and Bob Paxton for not only coordinating the festival, but helping us celebrate with ritual. But I also am going to be celebrating tomorrow with a podcast, Plant Spirits Lughnasadh Rite. It's a ceremony I did on Circle Craft Study at Lughnasadh time. I believe it was 2013, and it's going to be rebroadcast with our new internet radio network, CSNP, Circle Sanctuary Network podcast, on Sunday, August 2nd at 6 p.m. Central Daylight Time. So if you want another facilitated ceremony for this time of year, yes, I'm doing one by virtue of internet radio technology and podcasting tomorrow. And on Monday, I'm doing a Lammas full moon ritual. And I do full moon rituals with some people from the Circle Sanctuary community every month. And because this particular holiday time coincided with full moon, it seemed really fabulous to be able to have the Lughnasadh and Lammas theme be the focus of our full moon. So if you are interested in joining me and others, you can send us, sign up at the Circle Sanctuary website. Be sure to get your request in by noon on Monday, earlier if you can, and we'll send out information about it, more details. Indeed, if you aren't sure yet whether you want to join us, Well, you can tune in to the Circle Sanctuary Community Facebook page on Monday night at 7 p.m. Central Daylight Time, and we will be live streaming it there. So to answer your question, Deb, I like to do a series of rituals and the 5 levels of celebrating Lammas and Lughnasadh. I have something for each of those in my own personal practice. I have my personal work, and often it takes the form of doing a meditation, greeting the rising sun, doing some chants. I did some chant crafting last night as part of Lammas night time. And I also plan to be celebrating the full moon with our full moon circle on Monday night. And because the full moon actually appears full for multiple nights, on Tuesday night, I'll be also doing a full moon ritual celebrating this time, but it will be a household ceremony for myself and my husband. So thank you for that question. And I am glad for your comment, Deb, and I'm making my way through here. Emily, spirit dancer, thank you. You got a seasonal harvest feast with everything made from scratch. That is so fabulous. And yes, doing some sun or harvest magic crafting is excellent. Some people will put things up at this time, and all sorts of preserves, and will can things and freeze things. I start doing my herb harvesting in my gardens at my house at this time. And I do think it's fabulous to have a celebration as harvest is beginning. And one of the reasons that people did harvest ceremonies at the start of harvest was to help assure a bountiful harvest, focusing community attention to that, putting forth prayers for the divine, and really hoping that the harvest not only will be good, but it would be safely brought in and stored well. Indeed, in days before refrigeration and all of the electricity and some of the conveniences we have now, how your harvest turned out really would impact how you would be living, you and others, not only your household, but your community. And I see that we have a sharing of making 2 loaves of zucchini bread. Well, and I think making bread at this time of year is a fabulous way to go. And yes, some of the traditions with this holiday have evolved, including with the Circle Sanctuary community. A number of community members discovered they were gluten intolerant. So at our big Lammas feast, we will have the gluten stuff for people that can eat it, the alternatives for those who don't do well with gluten. In our ceremonies, we often would be sharing some food, going around the circle. Obviously, during a pandemic time, that tradition isn't going to be implemented, but essentially being able to have things to be shared within community, ritually in a ceremony and at a feast can be fabulous. And we try to have a number of things that are shared so that hopefully it fits everybody's dietary preference. Some other things that you might consider doing at this time of year is to go to a virtual county fair, and then post-pandemic, actually go to a county fair in your area. The county fairs that are widespread across America over the last several hundred years actually have their roots in the Lammas fairs of medieval time and before. And it's wonderful. Sometimes it's art fairs, often there are games, there's feasting, there's music. it's a way to actually get out and celebrate the season. It might not be called Lughnasadh, probably it isn't, probably isn't even called Lammas. I used to live in a place near Madison, Wisconsin called Prairie, and I found it really interesting that that farming community celebrated two of the Celtic fire festivals. Indeed, the ones that are not as much known about as Beltane and Samhain, we're talking about Imbolc and Lughnasadh. Groundhog's Day, beginning of February, yes, there was the whole looking to see if the groundhog would see its shadow. And then we had, for our Lughnasadh, something called the Sun Prairie Corn Festival. Yes, it's corn in the maize form of it, rather than corn in the wheat form. And having been part of those celebrations, I am pretty convinced that part of how they got hardwired into Sun Prairie as a community's traditions has come from the fact that some people with Celtic heritage settled that part of Wisconsin many, many years ago. And I'm looking at some more comments here, and I see Vanessa. I see people of all races having huge Sabbath festivals and getting back to nature and community roots. I agree. I think that is a really wonderful thing to be able to envision and to connect with. And I'm thankful to all of you who've been putting some things in the chat. And what I'd like to do in the last few minutes before we go into our next part of our festival is share with you a chant for the holiday. Lammas Day and Lammas Night, blazing fire, blessings bright. Lammas Day, Lammas Night, harvest magic and sacred rite. Lammas Day and Lammas Night, blazing fire for blessings bright. Lammas Day, Lammas Night, harvest magic and sacred rite. So a few closing words. Thank you all who are watching live and who are watching later for helping us take our Green Spirit Festival into cyberspace this year. It is my hope that some ideas that have come forth in this workshop will help you not only continue your celebration this year, but be something to help inspire you in times to come. And as I'm preparing to depart and let the next part come forth, I invite any of you who wish to give some feedback into the Q&A. Don't have to ask a question. You can just put some feedback in there. What is something that you take from this workshop into your own celebration of this sacred time? And if you wish, I invite you to put it in the chat, or if you prefer, you can send an email to me, Selena, SELENA, at circlesanctuary.org. So let's take a few moments now. Reflect on ourselves and in our own circle of light, in our own place where we're watching. We give thanks to the divine that we have called and we've worked with. We take some of that light into ourselves to brighten our day and illuminate our night at this magical time. And we call to mind the 5 dimensions of celebrating Lughnasadh and Lammas. Individual, something personal that we do, just ourselves, as part of celebrating this. It's a powerful time to reflect on what's working and what's not working in your life, and to call to mind guidance for dispelling what's not working and enhancing what is. And let us call to mind our household, and whether we live with other humans or creatures or houseplants and nature spirits, ancestral spirits, let us spend a few moments now and be thankful for our home and our household. And if you haven't already done so, you may want to consider having some symbol of Lughnasadh visible in your household as part of your celebration. And you may wish to do some kind of offering of grain or some kind of fluid, juice, tea, water, mead, wine, beer, a lot of different choices to the land. And then spend a few moments calling to mind spiritual community. Spiritual communities you've connected with before as part of this holiday celebration. Being thankful for them. And thankful for being part of the spiritual community that has converged in this way through Circle Sanctuaries, Green Spirit Festival. So we give thanks to community. And now we give thanks for planet Earth, our home, and that great web of life and light around it. And may we be part of solutions and not pollutions as we go into this next turning of the wheel. And finally, the 5th dimension, that of being part of the celebration across the centuries, across time, across cultures, with a look to the future and knowing how we celebrate today and how we encourage others to celebrate who share our viewpoints and resonate with these sacred ways, how we are laying the groundwork to continue this resonance with nature. Green Spirit blessings upon you. Green Spirit blessings around you. Green Spirit blessings within you. Green Spirit blessings now and in times to come. So be it. Thank you all for being part of this celebrating Lughnasadh and Lammas.